Okay, so in this next couple examples, we're going to be finding the square roots of numbers, right? Whether it be a positive square root, a negative square root, or both. Okay, so the first number looks like in part A, it's radical 64, so it looks like it's asking for the positive square root of 64. Okay, and we have to know, okay, what number multiplied by itself will give us 64. Okay, and that is going to be 8 times 8. Right, so we can write this as just positive 8. Right, so it's just asking for the positive square root there. Okay. Now in the next example in part B, it's asking for the negative square root. Right. So what is the negative square root of 64? Right. So again, I know that 8 times 8 gives me 64. Right. But it's like I have this little negative sign on the outside. Right. So it's the opposite of 8, or negative 1 times 8, which is negative 8. Okay. And so that's what we're looking for in part B. Okay. In part C, what number multiplied by itself gives us 0? Okay, so we're actually just going to write this as 0. Okay. Again, hopefully that example is fairly straightforward. I think it kind of makes sense. Okay. The next part though might kind of confuse us a little bit. Right. So we may recognize that first of all they're asking for both the positive and the negative square roots here. Okay. And we have to kind of realize that they give us basically 0.25 or 25, right? We know that 25 is a square root, or a perfect square, it's 5 times 5. But we also have to notice that there are 2 places to the right of the decimal here, okay? And so if there are 2 decimal spaces to the right in a product of 2 different numbers, that means that both numbers to start with have to have one spot to the right of the decimal, okay? And so here's kind of what I mean by this. First of all, we have to take into account the positive and the negative for our answer, okay? And I can conclude that this is the same thing as basically that 0.5 times 0.5 will give us 0.25, right? Because we see that in the question, there are two spaces to the right of the decimal in the question, and there are 2 spaces to the right of the decimal in the answer. And I know that 5 times 5 is 25. Right, so my answer for this one is going to be plus or minus 0.5. Okay, so a little bit tricky there, but hopefully we'll get another example here. Okay, in part E, they're asking for the positive square root of negative 4. Okay, and we're again thinking what number, I'm going to write this out, like what number multiplied by itself is negative 4. Right? That's the question we're asking ourselves. Right? So we think 4, right? Well, it's going to be, well, 2 times 2 won't work, okay, because that multiplies to positive 4. Okay? Negative 2 times negative 2 won't work, because that multiplies to positive 4 as well. So we really can't take a number and multiply it by itself to get a negative number. Right? So the answer for this one is actually undefined. Right? We can't actually do that. We can't take the square root of a negative number. Now in Algebra 2, we'll talk about a specific rule where we can, okay, but not yet in Algebra 1. Okay, we'll look at a couple other examples here. Okay, in part A, they ask us for the positive square root of 81. I know that 81 is 9 times 9, so again, what number multiplied by itself gives you that radicand of 81? Okay, and your answer is just going to be positive 9. Okay, in part B, they ask for the negative square root of 81. So again, this is like negative 1, right, multiplied by, what number multiplied by itself gives us 81? Well, it's 9, right? And so this is now turns into negative 9 for our final answer. Okay, in part C, we get the fact that they ask for the negative square root of 0. Okay, and again, we can multiply this by negative 1 multiplied by, what number multiplied by itself gives you 0? Well, that's 0, and negative 1 times 0 is 0. Okay, again, fairly straightforward. Okay, in the next example here, they ask for a positive and a negative square root. Okay, it looks like in the answer there are 4 places to the right of the decimal. Right, so what number multiplied by itself is going to give us 4 spots to the right of the decimal? Okay, again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I know there needs to be 2 spaces to the right of the decimal in each of these numbers here. And again, we're looking for the same number. right? I know that 4 times 4 is 16, so why don't I just do 0, 4, and 0, 4? Okay, and so this is actually going to be our answer, right? They ask for the positive and negative square root here, okay? And we're going to basically say this is going to be plus or minus 0.04 as our final answer. Okay, and then finally the last one, they're asking for the positive square root of -9. I cannot think of a number multiplied by itself which gives me -9. Right? So I have a negative radicand, so I know that this is going to be undefined. Okay, I know this knowledge is fairly basic so far, but it's going to be helpful for us moving forward.